Betfair. More ways to bet, more ways to win.
Well, with just one round of matches left to play in this season's UEFA Champions League group stage, 9 of the 16 places available in the knockout phase have been filled. So match day 6 of the competition still holds plenty of intrigue, and given the year that's in it, there will no doubt be a surprise or two come the final placings and permutations when they're all resolved. My name is Conor Morris, and you're very welcome along to the big build-up show on independent.ie, brought to you in association with Betfair. And I'm going to be getting some betting tips and advice from Betfair's Sam Rosbottom a little bit later on in the programme. But first, I'm joined by the former Blackburn, Chelsea, Celtic and England striker Chris Sutton, and by Coventry, Sunderland and Republic of Ireland defender Gary Breen. Chaps, you're both very welcome. Really intriguing match day 5 in the UEFA Champions League. And as I said, lots of things still to be resolved as we look ahead to that crucial match day 6. So I'm going to dive right in, and we might start with, I suppose, the team with a lot of issues going to match day 6. Manchester United, who it felt were in control of a very difficult group right throughout this campaign. But now, following a 3-1 defeat to PSG at Old Trafford, Chris Sutton, they've got to go to RB Leipzig in round 6. And it's still in their hands, but they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, well, they've made a little bit of a mess of this Champions League campaign. They were in a great position, of course, before they went over to Istanbul. Lost that game, won the home leg, and just needed a point out of these last 2 games. But it's never easy, never plain sailing at Manchester United at this moment in time, is it? You know, they go from one week to the next. The game on at the weekend against Southampton, there were United fans calling for Ollie's head at half-time after the game. He was an absolute genius. In fairness, in the Champions League at home, they've been, excellent this season. But the turning point of the game last night was, I thought, the manager's decision to leave Fred on. And I know we can talk about the chances which Anthony Martial missed in the second half. Big, big chances that he should have taken. Cavani hitting the bar, but I thought that Fred's in discipline in the second half, even to go to ground when he knew he was on a yellow card. He should have had a straight red in the first half. But, I know they were 2-1 down at that stage, but there was enough there for them to get back into the game. And now they have real work to do going over to Leipzig in Germany. And they need a point, but Leipzig need to win the game. So it's going to be a tough ask.
It's an interesting one, Gary, isn't it? They probably should have moved the game to Paris because they seem to have no problem beating PSG away. But when they come to Old Trafford, it flips on its head. And no doubt, looking ahead to that Leipzig game, Nagelsmann will have a plan for Manchester United. And the thing with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Manchester United fans, because they're very vocal, is you don't know from one day to the next. I was going to say 1 week to the next, but there's so many games now. It's usually 4 or 5 days in the turnaround. And you don't know which team's going to turn up.
Well, that's the frustration, the lack of consistency. I think there's no doubt in that they're quality players, but to play for Manchester United and get them back where they believe they belong, it's about being able to do it week in, week out. And that's the frustration more than anything, that they can't do that. I think it's a tough challenge, really, now going to Germany. Leipzig won all their home games this season. They'll be smarting from the 5-0 defeat earlier in the season. It'll be interesting to see whether or not he plays a back 3 in that game against United. But as Chris just said there, in total control of that group early on, and to let it slip out of their hands the way they have done. They can only look inward. Chris is right there in terms of the substitution. We're looking at Fred in terms of his selection for Manchester United. It's to be that combative midfielder in there. It's to make challenges. It's exactly what they need. But I think at times when you do get booked early, I think as a player, you have that ability to ride out the rest of the game. But I felt watching that game last night, it was inevitable that he was going to be sent off. And I think that's where that strong management needs to come in. I think Solskjaer is going to take a lot of criticism, and I think rightly so, because that was a very, very bad decision from his point of view.
Let's, chaps, just talk quickly about selection headaches now that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer might have, because they lack a little bit of experience at the very top level. Obviously, Cavani brings bags of that. We know about his goals record. He also brings a little bit of variety to the attack, and he's a physical presence in the box. He's very astute in the runs that he makes, but he was kind of a little bit of a passenger last night, and they do have so much quality in that front 4. I'm not sure what's his best team.
Well, it's a difficult one in terms of Solskjaer. We don't know whether he knows what's his best team. Even the recruitment of Van der Beek for that amount of money, and there didn't seem to be a natural position for him to play, bearing in mind how good Bruno Fernandes has been. But I think, yeah, you're right. I think Cavani, Connor, Chris will know. I think he's a top-class centre-forward, but whether or not he suits the system that United play at their best, which is a counter-attacking style, not necessarily the way that Cavani wants to play. He's an old-fashioned number 9, stays between the goalposts. I think at times when Solskjaer plays that diamond, it means that he has to play those split strikers, the likes of Greenwood, Martial, Rashford in those wide areas, attacking from out to in. But I don't think that suits Cavani. So I think it's great that he has those options, but who gets the nod on those big games remains to be seen.
We've touched on, Chris, that kind of uneasy relationship that Solskjaer has with the fans. As you said, he's 20 minutes away from being under big pressure. Then he's a genius. Were they to go to Germany, lose to Leipzig, fall out of the Champions League, we know where they are in the Premier League. Christmas, New Year, very busy time in the Premier League. It's going to be a very interesting 4 or 5 weeks for him, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But, if you're suggesting, do I think he'll be sacked in and around Christmas time?
Thanks for getting to my question a bit more directly, yeah.
I don't think so. I think a lot of teams this season, they've been so inconsistent. And, United fans no doubt will be so frustrated. Their away record is absolutely phenomenal, isn't it? But their home record has just been, really, really woeful. But the pressure's on again, as it is every week with Manchester United. And you can't work them out, really, because they are so good at times, and then they let themselves down with poor performances. I just thought last night that and I haven't criticised him too much this season, and he has got things wrong. But last season, I think that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has to take this one on his own shoulders, because I think he was the person who made the bigger mistake, because Fred shouldn't have been on the pitch. When you actually saw the scenes at half-time, and there was an incident with McTominay and Neymar just before half-time where Neymar thought McTominay stamped on him. I'm not so sure he did, or whether that was intended. But the PSG players were all around the referee. And myself and Gary have been players ourselves. And that's what you do. You get in the referee's head. And they would have been saying, that Fred should have been sent off. And, it was inevitable what was going to happen. So decisions like that, absolutely crucial. That could be the decision which cost Manchester United going through from the Champions League group stages. So, he has to take that one on the chin himself.
Well, let's move across the city from the red half to the blue half and talk about Manchester City, guys. Gary, they're already through, of course, as group winners. They seem to find something like their better form, shall we say, in the Champions League. 0-0 away to Porto, a defensive display really in round 5, just to seal it, and they'll be at home to Marseille in round 6.
Yeah, and the biggest improvement, 4 consecutive clean sheets. I know people will say about the negative, but I think if Manchester City address the problems that they've had defensively with that attacking threat that they have, then it bodes well for them. I think certainly the signing of Diaz has been impressive. I'm looking forward to seeing just how that relationship develops with Laporte, because I think that could be potentially a top-class centre-half pairing. I think you definitely need that when you go deep into these competitions. But the biggest concern is, like you said there, Connor, is that the amount of shots that they're having and they're not being as clinical as we normally associate with them. But like you said, 18 shots and they still don't score a goal. But the reality is that if they continue to create those, they will get those goals. There's no doubt about it. And I think they'll look at it. I think they'll be smarting from last season's Champions League exit, when the way that the draw unfolded and the teams that were going out, they had a massive opportunity. And that was the biggest frustration for anyone who's a Guardiola fan, City fan, is that they didn't take advantage of it. I think they've got the bit between their teeth now, and I think they've got an opportunity now, bearing in mind the struggles of some of the so-called bigger teams in this competition.
Yeah, and it's kind of almost a repeat of last year. Gary mentions, Chris, I mean, when Pep arrived in Manchester, he was trying to get over this Champions League semi-final hoodoo. He'd reached 4 in consecutive seasons, hadn't got to a final. Now he can't get to a semi-final. He's been there 4 years and he's not made one. And yet, if you talk to people, they still think that Manchester City on their day, because of Pep principally, okay, they've got lots of talent, of course, but his acumen has people thinking they should win a Champions League under it.
Well, yeah, and I think we all understand that. I think I don't know whether Gary agrees, but that's what he was brought into Manchester City for. Of course, they want success in the Premier League, but to win the big one, the Champions League, and it would have been frustrating, more so the teams who Manchester City have actually been defeated by. Lyon last season. I mean, everybody sitting before the game would have thought Manchester City were an absolute shoo-in. And maybe this season, it's going to be their season. I think they've had a sticky start. They were my tip for the Premier League. But do you know what? They haven't even got started yet. They're in a good place in the Champions League. I know they thumped Burnley really well last weekend, but they haven't scored enough goals. They've had a lot of injury issues. I think it will eventually click with them. And I think the important point Gary made was about that central defensive partnership. I think that is an improvement on previous seasons, and that could be the key this season.
Yeah, they're 11th in the Premier League, by the way. It is pretty tight around the middle of the table. Home to Fulham at the weekend. They made plenty of changes in the Champions League, so could be quite a few changes, and they might get a few goals. As you said, got 5 against Burnley. But let's move on to Liverpool. Also winning the group. They've been stop-start in the Champions League. I saw the Atalanta game where they were effectively passed off the pitch for a large share of it, albeit Atalanta, we know, can play extremely well, and they proved that in the Champions League last year. But 1-0 win against Ajax, Curtis Jones with the goal. But let's start from a selfish point of view, Gary, and talk about Caoimhín Kelleher and getting his big chance and taking it literally with both hands.
Well, I think he's announced himself, certainly over in England, around Liverpool. I'm sure Liverpool fans knew about him, but us supporters in Ireland, we've known for a long time. Connor, you saw him even performing for the under-21s, how impressive he's been there. And I think if anyone doesn't know Caoimhín, his skill set really is his ability to play out from the back. Now, that's a modern requirement for a goalkeeper. And anyone who does it as well as he does has got a massive future ahead of him. Listen, we've seen the saves. He's a big, strong lad. I don't think he's got that core strength yet as a young goalkeeper, but that will come. But I think what's so impressive is his mindset as well. He has that calm authority about him for such a young player, and that's what's so impressive. The fact that Klopp gives him the nod ahead of Adrian in a game of that magnitude. Now, people will say it's Ajax at home. You know, it's not that. It was a massive game for Liverpool, bearing in mind the context, the amount of injuries they have, 9 senior players out, the pressure was on, the fact that Jurgen Klopp is not in the best of moods at the moment, shall we say. He's trying to take on the world. So that was a massive game, and his performance was so impressive. From a personal point of view, and for us, Connor, back in Ireland, we're looking at a situation now that if he is number 2 at Liverpool and he's shown how the quality he has there, then it's a challenge then for Randolph, who's not getting his game at West Ham. Listen, Darren Randolph's never let us down, but it's great that we do have that strength in depth now coming through. But this is a player, a goalkeeper of real quality. He's got a massive future in the game. Yeah,
he certainly does. It was interesting, actually. Jurgen Klopp said it was one of the biggest European nights in his time at Anfield. And when you consider some of the games they've had, he knew just how important it was. And Chris, it was nice to see him go straight to the young goalkeeper at full time and really celebrate him. He's such a class again from Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, I think that, Gary touched on it. His temperament. I've not seen a lot of him, if I'm totally honest, but he seemed calm. He seemed assured. The fact that Jurgen Klopp had the faith to put him in ahead of Adrian says it all. And it was a big game. And, it's very difficult for goalkeepers, especially because it's difficult for all players when they go in and sort of get one shot, as it was. But, it can go either way, of course. But what it did seem is that he can cope in that situation. And, he did very, very well. And now Jurgen Klopp knows that he can trust him as and when Alisson is out.
And it was a great night for them outside of what they did at Anfield as well, because that drawn game between Atalanta and Midtjylland means that they go through. Liverpool, of course, away in Denmark against Midtjylland in round 6. But what it does do, Chris, it allows him now, the pressure is off and he can chop and change, because as we know, and as Jurgen Klopp has told many a broadcaster out there, he's had a right old whinge. 5 games in 14 days start with Sunday's visit against Wolves. So they do have a lot of games. Is he justified to be as annoyed as he has been?
No, it's been Jurgen Klopp, hasn't he, the last week or so. Jurgen Klopp wouldn't like broadcasters telling him who to pick for his team, so he shouldn't be telling broadcasters which game they should be picking. Yeah, he's happy to take the big money, the big television revenue, and spend it and lavish it on big wages and transfer fees, and they signed up for it. And that's the bottom line. And because they signed up for it, all the Premier League clubs have to get on with it. And you know, let's get it right. Liverpool aren't in a bad place at this moment in time. They're already through in the Champions League. Yes, they've been extremely stretched squad-wise, but what we're seeing the emergence of some really good young talent who are getting the opportunity. And in many respects, that's a bonus to Jurgen Klopp, knowing that he can trust these young men now.
Yeah, and they're still very much firing on both fronts. And the injury crisis, Gary, just as a centre-half, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on Van Dijk. And a lot of people have been saying, you know, you look at the players that have come in and tried to play a supporting role to Van Dijk, they're now being thrust into the limelight. Joel Matip is the main one. And it's a different type of dynamic to try and carry the burden of Liverpool on your shoulders when you're replacing a player of the stature of Van Dijk, who in many respects has probably changed the entire culture of the club.
Oh, he has, without a doubt. He was the final piece in that jigsaw. That's not to say he's a one-man team, because he's not that by any stretch of the imagination. But in terms of how Liverpool enter the play, fullbacks in advanced areas, you need centre-halves who can cope in wide positions. So even when people balked at the amount that Liverpool paid for Van Dijk, I was adamant at the time he was the perfect centre-half for their system. But you're right. It's that authority that has that calming influence. But it's within a team infrastructure that he excels so much. And the likes of Matip coming in, who I think has been a brilliant free transfer signing from Schalke. I know he's had his injury problems as such, and Fabinho goes back there. Fabinho looks effortless at centre half. He really does in so many aspects of the game. My only concern, and Chris will know this, is that just his awareness when crosses are coming into the box off his shoulder, because as a centre midfielder going into the back four, you can see everything. It seems so much easier in terms of the hectic nature of centre midfield, but it's those moments that you just look a little bit vulnerable. But I think that Chris is right. Those young players coming through. I think as a young player at Liverpool, a club like that with such a strong squad, you're probably looking at the scenario and thinking, will I ever get my chance? But when the injuries were coming in and the games were coming thick and fast, as a young player, your mindset has to be, this is my chance, I've got to take it. And the likes of Curtis Jones has done exactly that. I thought he was brilliant in that right side of midfield. He has that ability. We've seen it, left foot strike, right foot strike, no problems, that technical ability. But his positional awareness, his understanding of his role within that team was so good to see. And it's another example of just how good Klopp is as a manager, that he's able to get these young players and senior players, because he's made a massive influence on all of them. But in terms of what Chris said, going back, I don't agree with him in terms of the moaning about the fixtures. I think ever since Klopp's come into the Premier League, he's complained about the fact that in the winter break in the Bundesliga, they had that break. We didn't. In fact, we play more games. We try and fit in as many as we can. So both him and Guardiola have been quite vocal about that ever since they've come into the Premier League. But this is what's unique about the Premier League and why we love it so much. There is a physical challenge and not just a technical league.
Well, let's move on to Chelsea. Talk about Frank Lampard a little bit and what's going on there. Very much a work in progress, but kudos to them. They've won the group, Chris, through to the last 16. And, you know, I might even get Sam Robsbottom's opinion on what kind of odds you might have got on Olivier Giroud popping up and getting 4 goals in a game. It's incredible. The much maligned Frenchman still very much has a role at Stamford Bridge, Chris.
Absolutely. Surprised you called them a work in progress. They're a pretty good work in progress, aren't they? When you go back to the start of the season and there were question marks over, I think, Frank's coaching ability, whether he could get that defence organised and sorted out. I think he's left a lot of people with egg on the face. They look pretty much watertight now. Good piece of business getting Mendy in. Silva has that authority at the back. And then you've just mentioned Giroud. And this season he's been third choice, but what a third choice player. I've always rated Giroud. I've always thought he was an intelligent player. He's not been the quickest, but he's always been a great link man, a great focal point, brings other players into the game. But they have so many options. And the key to this season for Chelsea was keeping the back door shut, because, you know, going forward, Timo Werner, on his day, unplayable. He's missed a lot of big chances this season, but he has that blistering pace. Tammy Abraham is coming on to a game. Ziyech has given them more creativity. And we haven't even mentioned the likes of Havertz, you know, who's just finding his way back into the team. Mason Mount has been phenomenal. We can keep going mentioning these Chelsea players, and they are very much in with the shout in all competitions. He spent the big money in the summer. And with spending, 240 odd million, pressure levels have gone up. The owner expects, and at this moment in time, Chelsea are in a really good place.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we could go on mentioning the players that have been brought in, because as you say, 240 million plus. He's brought in 12 or 13 players. The same amount really have gone through the revolving door the other way, Gary, which I suppose, to echo what Chris is saying, I mean, massive kudos to Frank Lampard, because that's a very difficult thing to do very quickly. But then you look at a sense of history repeating itself. The two key signings for Liverpool, centre-half and goalkeeper, and that Mendy signing seems to be an inspired choice.
Well, it has done. Listen, now they've got a goalkeeper who saves goals rather than throws them in, unfortunately, Kepa. It was a scenario where every time there was a strike on goal, and I don't care how good a defence you are, it will impact on your mindset as a defender, because you feel that you'll have to overcompensate every shot that's going in on goal. There are times as a defender you might just guide the opponent into an area where you can strike at the goal, but you're comfortable, your goalkeeper will deal with it. That wasn't the case at Chelsea. So Chris is right. Silva comes in at centre-half and gives you that authority. He really does, that calmness. And people talk about his age, but he reads the situation so well. His awareness, looking over his shoulder, gets himself in good positions. And that kind of authority then seeps throughout the rest of the team, where the other defenders who at times last season looked like a liability for Chelsea, to be perfectly honest, they now look like they're coming on so much more. So I think that's been a brilliant signing, and one that I think they'll, if they haven't done it already, I think they're looking to extend his one-year contract again. Because if you look at that now, that's 8 clean sheets in the last 10 games, 2 goals conceded. I mean, that's incredible. And Chris just reeled off all that attacking threat. If you've got a defence who just keeps you in the game and keeps repelling the attacks, then you're going to win so many games comfortably. Because the problem last year was that they had all that attacking flair, but the opponent would just do one ball forward, it would go through their defence, and suddenly the complexion of the game changes completely because you've conceded a goal and panic sets in. All that is gone now. So I think they're in a great position, Chelsea. I really do, because they've got strength in depth, as Chris rightly said there. And the likes of Giroud, I mean, in terms of the criticism he's had throughout his career, I think that essentially comes from being at Arsenal and following on from Thierry Henry, Van Persie, and then suddenly everyone thinks you're going to be at that level. He's not quite there, but he's a very, very good centre forward, and he proved it. Those 4 goals last night are absolutely sublime in terms of finishing, right foot, left foot, header, and then the brilliantly taken penalty.
Yeah, it's and Didier Deschamps has traditionally shown a lot of faith in him, which speaks volumes. I know he had his troubles at Arsenal, but his goals record was always very good. And I'm pretty sure I heard somebody say this week he's very close to Thierry Henry's record at national level.
Yeah, he's chasing that down.
So he's within striking distance of that. Just to finish on Chelsea, Chris, then, because you're a fully signed up member then of the Frank Lampard fan club. I mean, he's a very young manager. I like what he's saying at the moment. When you hear Frank,
nothing wrong with being young, Connor.
Yeah, well, if you're good enough, you're young enough, and you'll win nothing with kids. He's got plenty of youngsters there. He's only a pup in terms of his managerial career, but he's going up against the likes of Mourinho and Pep and Jurgen Klopp. And I like what he's talking about. He talks a lot now about what his team are doing without the ball, and defensively they had to tighten up and stuff, which I think is sending a message to the Chelsea fans that, but yet, it would be a massive leap of faith to say that Chelsea would win a major piece of silverware. I mean by that Champions League or Premier League this early.
Yeah, but that's not impossible with the ingredients which he had. I think last season, it's a bit of a free shot, really, because of the nature of the transfer embargo. There wasn't great expectations. Now he spent the money. We saw the game at the weekend, Mourinho cranking up the pressure on Frank, saying, now Chelsea has spent the money, he needs to go and win something. And I think that Frank and Jody Morris, who's there alongside him, I think that they accept that. They know the deal. 240 million, I think that's the most ever spent in a window. But they have quality, they have strength in depth, they have a goalkeeper, as Gary's phrase, who doesn't chuck them in anymore, absolutely spot on, and they have that solidity at the back. Ben Chilwell has been a really excellent piece of business. So they just need to keep that consistency, but strength in depth-wise, when you have Giroud, third choice, coming on, banging the goals in, as he does, and he hasn't had many opportunities. That tells you everything you know about Chelsea. I haven't even mentioned Pulisic. Haven't mentioned Hudson-Odoi. The names keep coming, and Frank needs the results to keep coming, but they're going well.
Well, another Frenchman that needs results to turn around and go as well. Let's talk about Real Madrid. I mean, beaten home and away by Shakhtar Donetsk, struggling in La Liga, as we know, down around fourth place. I was looking at their fixtures, Gary. Sevilla and Atletico up next in La Liga. I mean, there's big problems there for Zidane, isn't there?
Oh, it's incredible. Just 1 point from the last 3 games domestically. And then obviously, like you're saying, Shakhtar beating them home and away. It does put massive pressure on them. Of course it does. And we talked about City not taking advantage last year, but remember how comfortably they dealt with Real Madrid in the last 16. So this is a concern. This is the Champions League is what is synonymous with Real Madrid and certainly with Zidane in terms of his impact as a manager there. So yeah, real pressure I think there is on him now. I think the president is a massive fan. He obviously brought Zidane back in. But I think there's something that's hanging over a lot of those managers, be it Manchester United and Ole Solskjaer, and even at Juventus now, is the fact that Pochettino is still out there. I think one of those big clubs is going to make a move soon for this manager. And I think anyone who's having an indifferent time in terms of form is vulnerable to that club taking on Pochettino.
Well, we'll move it on. I just want to touch on Juve and Pirlo, Chris, and what you've made of the infancy of his managerial career. There's lots going on. They play Barcelona, of course, in round 6. Both teams, Barca and Juve, won 3-0 in round 5. That's kind of a nothing game unless you value a high premium on winning the group. Lionel Messi's been rested in a couple of rounds. But Juve, Ronaldo, by the way, 750th career goal. But
that's quite good.
It's all right, isn't it? I haven't checked.
Where is that figure come from? Who scores 750?
I know.
I don't even know. I was trying to add them up last night in terms of all the goals, where they're coming from. And I was thinking, is he counting the training goals?
Yeah, it's outrageous, isn't it? I mean, somebody's 64 goals in Champions League group stages.
Amazing.
It's phenomenal. And he's a big asset to Juve, and Pirlo needs his big assets, doesn't he, Chris?
Yeah, and do you know what? It's been a bit of a slow start, similar to to Real Madrid, similar to Barcelona, who have had iffy starts. You know, we're talking about with those three teams, 3 European giants, but you just don't feel it this year that any of those 3 are going to win the Champions League at this moment in time. You do think that that Juve under Pirlo, certainly will improve, but it's a slow burner.
Guys, we're pretty much at time, so we've covered a good range of everything. I just want to maybe finish up with a prediction then on Manchester United, because City have won the group, Liverpool have won the group, Chelsea have won the group in fine style. What's going to happen in Leipzig next week?
Well, this is the issue you normally have with Manchester United is that there's a shocking result and then there's an incredible one that saves the day again, and that's been the course throughout Solskjaer's reign as manager. So it's not beyond them. They can go their course. We've said about them the quality players that they have, but it's just the consistency that they're lacking. I'm just thinking that this is a tougher away game than many people think. I think people are going to look at the fact that they've beaten them 5-0 in the first game, but I don't think that's going to have much bearing on this one. I think it's going to be a tough challenge for United. Chris?
I mean, how can you ask that question and actually think you're going to get a decent answer? It's impossible. How can you judge better away from home? But Gary's spot on. Leipzig, really good at home. What United are going to turn up? It's impossible. I would think, based on United's away performances this season, the way that they seem to counter really very, very well, that United would have the edge. But it's Manchester United, and because it's Manchester United, they're impossible to judge.
Okay, we'll accept that as an answer.
Is that sitting on the fence?
That's
United to go through. How they do it, I don't know.
Well, all 4 Premier League sides, of course, made the last 16 last season. Only 1 through to the quarter-final and no semi-final. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do, as we say, in another season where it looks like there's going to be 1 or 2 dark horses. But Chris and Gary, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I'll be seeing you again, by the way, before Christmas for our special festive football preview show. But until then, from the 2 boys, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
We'll move it on now to get some steer on what the markets are saying and what's happening on Betfair with Sam Rosbottom. Sam, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time to steer me through the markets now. There's going to be a lot of interesting movement in the markets, I'm sure, after what happened in round 5, looking ahead to round 6. But where's the money going in terms of the outright betting for the UEFA Champions League season? Because as we've been discussing with Chris and Gary, a lot of teams in the mix. I mean, who's the outright favourites with you guys?
Yeah, it's been an incredible campaign already in the Champions League. This is why we love elite European football. You know, there are so many different surprises. There are so many great matches, and there have been so many changes. But one thing that has been pretty consistent is where the money is going on the market. So the favourites at the minute are Bayern Munich, the German champions, the reigning Champions League holders. They've looked really solid throughout their group stage so far. They're 3-1. They were initially 5-1 when the market first went up for this year's Champions League. They've been attracting most of the money, and like I've already mentioned, they do look the strongest team. Interestingly, Manchester City were the favourites initially at 4-1. They drifted out ever so slightly, despite looking pretty good in the Champions League. I think that the way they've been playing in the Premier League has affected their odds a little bit, and the punters have drifted their price out to 9-2 on the exchange. Looking at Liverpool, we've heard Chris and Gary talk about the issues that they've had. We've heard them talk about how they've been doing in the Champions League. They've been pretty steady, to be honest, in the betting market as the third most popular team with backers. And looking at Liverpool at the moment, they're around about 7-1 on Betfair Exchange to go all the way and lift the trophy. It was really interesting listening to the guys talk about Chelsea. Obviously, a lot of plaudits for Olivier Giroud's performance in round 5 with his 4 goals. They've been going under the radar slightly. They're unbeaten in the group stage, and they're a 16-1 shot to go all the way and win. Now, it is a pretty big ask. They are outsiders at 16-1, but with the exchange, no doubt that price and those odds, if they do get to the latter stages, will get a lot shorter. So 16-1 at the minute looks a lot of value for Chelsea to go on and win.
I see the old Barcelona shirt in the background. There must be a little bit of value knocking around for Barcelona at the moment, who are having their travails under Koeman, and we're not seeing Messi playing week in, week out at the moment, such as the importance put on La Liga games. But where are they?
Yeah, so looking at Barcelona at the minute, they're one of the big teams that really aren't fancied at the moment. They were as big as 22-1 at one point. They're now a 15-1 shout to go on and win the Champions League, but they've won 5 games out of 5 in this Champions League group stage so far. They have come up against Juventus. I know, Juve had that red card with Vidal being sent off, but, they looked pretty decent against another elite European side there. And I just think as well, the way Koeman is resting Lionel Messi, we once this group stage is done with, there's a long break until it picks up again in February. And who knows what position Barcelona are going to be in. But the way they've performed in the Champions League, 5 wins out of 5, 15-1 to go all the way and win. It's
incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, you would not have expected this 5-10 years ago at all.
I was going to say it was probably still called the European Cup when Barcelona were last 15-1, if even. What about the more kind of niche markets, top goal scorer? We spoke about Giroud getting 4 at the weekend. Morata's come in with a few goals as well. Where's that market going?
Yeah, so this is another interesting one. At the moment, it's flip-flopping between Erling Haaland and Robert Lewandowski. Although Haaland is one of those players that's leading the way on 6 goals, it is actually Lewandowski who is the favourite at 11-4. He's only scored 3 so far, but like we mentioned, Bayern Munich are the big favourites. They're the reigning champions. You're going to back them to get really far in this competition. And when you are looking at a top goal scorer market, that is what it depends on. You need a player in a team that is going to get those opportunities to score as many goals as possible. And with Lewandowski, I think the punters really see that. And that's why he's the favourite at the minute at 11-4, despite only scoring 3 goals. Erling Haaland, like I said, is just behind him at 14-5. He's a joint top goal scorer at the minute. And those two keep flip-flopping, depending on the game weeks. Looking at some of the big names, Messi, we've spoke about how Koeman's giving him a rest. He's 12-1 to be the top goal scorer. Cristiano Ronaldo got his 750th goal this week playing for Juventus in the Champions League. They're another side that could potentially go all the way. They've only lost against Barcelona with been having 10 men. They've looked pretty steady. He's 7-1 to be the top goal scorer. And at the twilight of his career, I'm sure he's even more determined than ever to get that golden ball. Giroud, having scored 4, he's now on 5 goals. He scored that crucial, you could say, late goal against Rennes for Chelsea. Yeah. So he's popping up and scoring goals. He's 11-1. We mentioned, Chelsea have gone under the radar. Who knows? They could get to the latter stages. And another one of the players that's leading the way in the goal scoring charts at the moment is Alvaro Morata, who's having a bit of a renaissance at Atleti at the moment. He's 6-1 to be top goal scorer.
Okay, and do you get a lot of traffic on the Champions League market in particular at such a high-profile competition? And I would imagine as well, when the draw comes out after round 6 for the last 16, a lot of those bets will change.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, this is one of a massively popular market on the Betfair exchange, the Champions League. It is the best of the best, and punters do love. I think as well, what punters really love about the Champions League on the exchange is that there are so many surprises and there are so many shocks. And with that on the exchange, there are so many big prices as well to be had. We've already talked through some of the value in the outright market and some of the big prices there. Looking at some of the big shocks we've already had. So far to date, on the exchange, Shakhtar beating Real Madrid in Madrid was matched at 20-1 before kickoff. So some happy punters if they back that there. Over on the sports book, one of the biggest shocks was Manchester United beating Leipzig 5-0. A correct score 5-0 on the sports book was 250-1. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen next week.
Yeah.
But certainly, there's a lot of shocks in Champions League football, a lot of surprises, and with that comes some big odds as well.
Absolutely, but no surprise to see Bayern pretty much as tight as they can be at 3-1, 9-2 around Liverpool, 15-1 on Chelsea, and 16-1 or thereabouts on Barcelona. Really, really interesting. We didn't even mention Bayern Munich. They just plod along year after year, cruising through the group stages, and they would look to be justified favourites. There you have it then. You've heard from the experts, and you've also got the sage wisdom and insights on the exchange markets from Sam. Thanks for joining me on the Champions League preview show, which, as I said, is brought to you in association with Betfair. Enjoy the games next week, round 6. It's going to be very interesting indeed. I'll be back just before Christmas with another show as we look ahead to the Premier League Christmas action. I'm Conor Morris. Thanks very much indeed for your time.